Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. A little while back, one of my viewers requested a bag that she could use when going to hospital so that she can have all of her bits and pieces organised for her stay in hospital. Yesterday I was thinking about making this really giant beach bag because it's summer here in Australia now, and I thought, well, why not make this really big bag with lots of compartments in it that could be useful for a hospital stay. You could use it as a nursery bag if you've got a new baby and you've got to put all the clothes and things like that in there, and also a great big beach bag so you can shove all your towels and bathers and drink bottles and all sorts of things. So I've been working out a pattern this morning. I've got the fabric cut out and you're going to come along and see if this works out or not. Hang around. The fabric I'm using today is a rubber back curtaining, so it's got a nice weight to it. Ideally for this project, because it's so big, you would want to use a brill or a duck or a denim or even upholstery fabric, some kind of fabric that's got some good stability with it. This piece is 20 inches wide by 40 inches long, and this is part of the main body of the bag. So this is the outside of the bag. You want one piece, 20 inches wide by 40 inches long. I'm going to put the centimetres and the inches conversions up for you on the screen. We need the same for the lining. So I'm just using a cotton fabric for the lining here. That's also 20 inches wide by 40 inches long. And now this is the side gusset and the pocket. So I'm doing something a little bit different with the pockets here. This is 10 inches wide by 35 inches long. We want two of those for the side pockets. And for the lining, we want the same. We want two pieces that are 10 inches wide by 35 inches long. And then the front and back pockets, we want 10 inches wide by 20 inches long. And we want two of those. So front pockets, two at 10 inches wide by 20 inches long. Then you want to have a packet of bias binding. This one's only 20 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch. Ideally, I'd prefer to have something a little bit wider, but I don't have any at the moment, so I'm going to go with that. It's really just decorative. I don't have enough fabric to create handles for this particular bag, so I'm going to use the black strapping that I usually use. And my black strapping, which is at the shop, I'll get it later, is 1 inch wide, and we want to have 125 inches in length for the handles. So we want one really long continuous length. If you're making your handles, get a piece of fabric that's 4 inches wide across there and 125 inches in length overall. And you might have to join a few pieces together to get that length. Once you've got your length, fold each end in just 1/4 of an inch, and you'll do that on both ends. Later on, these ends, when we put the bag together, they're actually going to meet like that, so we don't need to worry about anything else except for one fold. Take the width of your handle fabric, fold it in half lengthwise, fold it in half again, and then what you're going to do is stitch down the short edge all the way along the two long edges and also at the other end. So you'll stitch the entire handle closed for the full length of 125 inches. And then you'll have a 1 inch wide handle. Let's get started. Find the main piece of fabric, which is 40 inches by 20 inches. We've got the 20 inches going across this way. Take the front and back pocket pieces, so you take the 10 inches by 20 inches, fold it in half with right sides together, make a mark on the edge there, open that out and draw a line across. So I've got a line drawn across the centre of my 10 by 20 inch piece. Once you've drawn that centre line there, we want to place this piece of fabric over the top of our main fabric. Measure from the top 5 inches down, and that's where it will line up here. And from the side edges, you'll line up your fabric 5 inches from that side and 5 inches from this side. We'll pin this in place, and what we're going to do is stitch straight down this line here. All we're going to do is secure the bottom of the pocket to the side of the bag, and we'll do that for the other pocket piece as well. That'll be stitched straight down that line there, and the pocket will sit up like this. Turn your fabric around and we'll do the same for the other end. So we've got the other one just sitting there like that. Mark the centre again and we'll draw a straight line down the centre. We'll place this 5 inches from the top and 5 inches from either side. Once you're happy with the position, pin that down as well. And just make sure the other pocket flap is out of the way. I'll take this to the machine now, and I'm just going to do a stitch straight across this line here, and I'll do the same on this piece of fabric as well. Now, because this is going to form the bottom of my pocket, I'm actually going to stitch this twice. I've stitched it down the center of both pieces of the pocket fabric, and I've done that twice just to secure it. Don't worry about these raw edges on either side here, because the handle is going to go all the way along the bag, and that will be stitched over the top of the side. You'll have your pocket up the top here, and your handles will be stitched over the side and cover up any of the raw edges. And this will be the base of your bag here. We've got our pocket here, and what we're going to do now is put some bias binding on the top edge. Now we want the best side facing the outside here. So to put your bias binding on, we've got the top edge of the fabric here. Take your bias binding, place it on the inside section of your pocket. So we're going to open that out, pin it in place, and I'm just going to show you this on the one piece of fabric for the minute. So we've got the pocket flap here, that's the top of your bag and the top of your pocket. Place the bias binding on the inside, the part that's closest to your main body of your bag. Then you can take your fabric and bring the other side of the pocket together. This is just so that you don't get confused and put the bias on the wrong side. It really doesn't matter if it goes on the wrong side, it just looks better when you don't see two rows of stitching. So if we have another look at that, we've got our pocket flap here. This is the top of the bag, and I've placed the bias binding on the inside section of the bag. And then later on, we'll turn that around and we'll stitch it down from the top, and you'll just have a really nice row of stitching. Repeat that for the other side. I've got the bias binding again on the inside pocket, which will come up. Later on, we'll turn that fold over. So that's both pocket pieces done. If you don't want to use bias binding, I'm going to give you another option. What you can use is a piece of fabric that is 1.5 inches wide, fold it in half lengthwise, bring the raw edges in on both sides, and then fold it together like this. So you want to have a contrast fabric for this, otherwise it defeats the purpose of putting the binding on most of the pockets. This is the side gusset and the pocket. Now, I thought I'd do something a little bit differently here. I want to have as few layers as possible to be stitched together on the side seams later. So I'm reducing this by one layer of fabric, and it'll help especially if you're sewing on a domestic machine. On your side gusset and pocket piece, this is the one that's 10 inches wide by 35 inches long. We want to measure 20 inches from the top down. And if I make a mark here for you to see, so we've got 20 inches from the top down here, and then we've got 15 inches here. This is going to be the side of our bag, the side gusset, which will be the height of the bag. We've got the 20 inches along here. Turn your fabric right side up and fold this fabric back to that 20-inch line. And then we're going to fold this raw edge down to that same line. Just pin that in place so that it's nice and secure. So you can see here, I've got 15 inches across there, and this is the 20 inches. So you've got 10 inches and then another 10 inches. It's folded in half. This is the pocket. So it just eliminates one layer of fabric. This becomes the base of the bag. This is the fold at the top of the pocket, and you've got the top of the bag just up there. We're going to take the bias binding just to make a decorative feature again, and we're going to place that over the top of the fold. Again, when you're putting your bias binding down, put the first side down on the inside of the pocket. So your bias binding is in place on the inside of the pocket, and when we stitch that later, the fold will come across the other side, and you'll have a nice decorative feature. Repeat that for the other pocket and side gusset area. We've got our main bag and the two pocket pieces from the main bag, and we're going to take this to the machine and stitch the bias binding down on all pockets. So there's the two pockets on the main bag, and then we've got the two pockets that are incorporated in the side gusset. So we'll take that to the machine and stitch that down. You've got the fold going just along here. Rather than stitching right on the fold, stitch right next to the fold. So I've stitched this right next to the fold. The fold is about a stitch width below where the stitching is right now. When we turn this around the other way, you can see that row of white stitching just along there. When you fold this over, You won't see that line of stitching underneath, and that will be nice and neat. Repeat that for all of your other pieces that have got the bias on it. Now that that's been stitched down on one side, we'll turn it around. Make sure you've got the right thread colour in and fold the other piece over and stitch it down. There's the top edge of the pocket. This is the outside edge and that's the inside edge. Repeat that for all of the other pocket pieces now. Using the other alternative for binding, I'm going to show you how to do that on the lining piece. So take the two lining pieces of fabric that are your side gusset and pocket pieces, which is the 10 inches by 35 inches. Take both of those, mark the 20 inches again, fold the fabric right side together again, and then bring the 20-inch section up. So you're bringing the raw edge over to that folded line. Pop a pin in place just to keep it in place there, and there is the fold, which is the top part of our pocket. So rather than using the bias binding that I used on the main fabric, you can use a contrast fabric, and you can do this on your main and the lining. Take a contrast fabric, you've got your 1.5 inches, fold it in half and fold the raw edges in. This fold in your fabric here, which is the top of the pocket, place the open edges over the top and fold that over and clip it all down all the way along. So you'll just have your fabric opened out halfway with your raw edges folded in. Place your fabric over the top up to the center. So your fabric is sitting over the top of your pocket equally on both sides, and you can just take this to the machine now and stitch all the way down that long edge, and it will stitch this in place as well. That's providing you've lined up both sides of fabric on your binding pieces. And that's one of the reasons why I actually like to do the bias binding, because sometimes it's just a little bit easier to do that, even though it's double the work. But I didn't have any contrast fabric that would suit the front of the bag, so I've used the bias binding, and on the lining of the bag I'm actually using some scrap fabric from the front of the bag as my contrast at the top of the pocket. So I can take this to the machine as well and stitch that all the way down the long edge, and we'll do that for both of the side gusset pocket sections of the lining. It's really just a matter of placing both layers down over the fabric and stitching it straight down. So it's certainly a lot easier than the bias binding and a lot less time consuming as well. Both layers are stitched down at the same time, but if you don't have fabric to match, bias binding works beautifully. Once you've done the binding at the top of your pockets on the gusset, remove the pin that you've got at the bottom, and I'm going to just stitch this down. It'll help me to line up my fabric when I'm attaching the main body of the bag. I'm just stitching really close to the edge. I don't want it to be seen on the outside of the bag. I'll do the same for the bottom section of the side of the bag as well. So just very close to the edge, and I've really just done that so that it sits nice and flat when it comes time to putting this to the main part of the bag. Once your binding is done on your side gussets and you've stitched that bottom edge down, fold it back and just line up your fabric on the side there and pop a pin in place to keep it secure. There's our pocket and the bottom edge with the raw edge there. Do that for all of your 4 pieces, lining and main. It's time to put our handles on the main body of the bag. If you're using strapping, we've just got one really long piece that is 125 inches long or 3.1 meters. You'll need to just seal the ends so they don't fray. Once you've sealed the ends, we can put them onto the bag. Now, if you're using handmade handles, that's fine. We'll go to the next step. Take the main fabric and you'll see these pockets are still flapping about. I've accidentally gone and sewn the side gussets on before we've put the handles on, so just pretend you haven't seen that. I'm just going to hide that so you don't know it's there, and I'll hide that one as well. You don't know it's there, right? You can see the 2 pocket flaps here. Lay them out nice and straight, and this strapping is going to be placed over the edge of the pocket all the way around with a loop outside both edges. Now the edge of the pocket here is 5 inches from the edge, and we want to place the handle directly over the top. We'll put the outside edge of the handle at 4.5 inches from the outside edge, and it doesn't matter where you start this, but ideally you want it underneath the bag. I've got this at 4.5 inches, and there's the edge of the pocket. So measure 4.5 inches from the outside edge, place your handle down, pin it in place, and you'll do that all the way to the top, and make sure your pocket is sitting underneath the handle. Make sure it's flat all the way around, and meet the other end with this end here. And continue to place this strapping at 4.5 inches from the outside edge. And continue that until you get to within 2 inches from the top. So your strapping is going to be stitched down. It'll be joined at the bottom here. Stitch all the way along until you get to here, come across, and then come back down and go all the way around. At this end, you want to do the same thing. Continue on up 4.5 inches from the outside edge and 2 inches in from the top. Take the center point of the other side of your strapping, so you've got your whole long length there, and that's the center that we marked earlier. We're going to line that up with the center point along here. So you've got the center lined up just there, and we'll line that up again here, making sure that it's 4.5 inches from this edge. Bring the top edges of your bag together where the handles are poking out. Line that up evenly, and just make sure that your handles are actually even around here. We want to ensure that these straps are the same size. And if you're happy with that, then you can leave it. If not, then you may need to tweak it so that you've got the same amount of handle strap out of the top, hanging out of the top on both sides. Now we can take this to the machine, and what we need to do is stitch both sides of the handle down on both sides of the bag here. The edge of my strap is just butted in to the other side, so I'm going to start stitching just on one side here where the flap is. I'll start stitching here, stitch over the 2 layers, come down to the top of the bag, back stitch, stitch across. I'm going to stitch across here 3 times. I'll go down, up and down again, then I'll come back down on this side, and I'll keep on going until I go past this section here, all the way up to the other end of the bag. Do the same thing over it 3 times, come back down to the center, and then I will actually just stitch around this to make sure that that stays in place. Then you'll repeat for the other side of the bag. Now remember, you haven't seen this section, okay? It doesn't exist. Close your eyes. So this is where my join is, and I'm going to start at the top section, stitch down from this flap to the next one, and continue on until we get to the 2 inches from the top. I'm within 2 inches from the top of the bag. I'm going to back stitch just to reinforce this section, turn the bag around, and over here I'm going to go down and then up and back again. And then I'm going to turn around, do a back stitch again, and then go all the way down. At this point here, some people like to do a square with a cross in it. That's up to yourself. If you feel you need to do that, you can go right ahead and do that. I'm comfortable with this being stitched across 3 times and then reinforced on either side of the strapping. And this is the side of the strapping that actually secures the side of the pocket down as well. As you get to the top of the pocket, I do like to reinforce that, because as I've said before, there's a lot of stress there, and continue on down. This is where the join is in the handles. I'll go over that a couple of times. When I come back to the end, I'm going to stitch across that as well. Again, where the pockets are, reinforce that. And come up to your 2 inches. Now I'm up to the part where it's joined just here. I'm going to stitch on either side just to make sure that stays in place. So this here is where the join is in my handle. It's just been stitched on either side. It's never going to go anywhere, and reinforced all the way around. Now we can secure the other side. For the other side, you can actually start straight at the top here, go all the way down to the other side, and then come back up around, remembering to reinforce near any stress points. Okay, that's the handle all secured in place. Now I'll show you how to put these side bits on. There's our handle in place all the way around, and just having that black there as a contrast against the blue really brings out the black in the straps as well, so it does look really nice like this. Okay, let's put these things on. Now take your lining piece, and we're going to be doing this for the main bag as well, so you'll be repeating this. With your lining fabric, fold that in half and mark a pin in the centre on both sides. So there's the centre of my fabric. Take one of your side gusset pieces, and we're going to place the pocket faced down, so we want the wrong side faced up. Find the centre, fold that in half, pop a pin, so there's the centre of our pocket, and place that directly over that centre point. Now we're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance for this bag. You can use whatever seam allowance you like, but whatever you choose to use, you need to make an allowance for that here. I'm using the 1/2 inch seam allowance from the raw edge here. Make a mark at 1/2 inch, and same at this edge here, and 1/2 inch in from the side seam as well. You can see I've got a little corner mark just there. What we'll be doing now is stitching from this point up to this point here. You can do a back stitch at the beginning and the end. So we're going to stitch 1/2 inch in from the side edge all the way across, back stitch at the beginning and the edge, and we'll turn around and do the same for the other side of the lining here. So place the other pocket down with the wrong side faced up and the pocket faced down, center it, mark your 1/2 inch and stitch right across. Then you can do the same thing for your main bag too. So I'm going to start stitching at that point there. I'll do a back stitch, and I'll be doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And continue to the other end and stop 1/2 inch before. Repeat that for the other side, and we will repeat that for the main body of the bag as well. Take your lining again, and we've got our side gusset with the pocket and the main body of the bag just there, and there's the other side gusset. We're going to bring this together now to close up the bag. If it's easier for you, you can just go and stitch the raw edges of the bag. Just stitch it up at the top there on each side on the pockets. It'll just help you keep everything in place without having to have pins all over the place. Take your side gusset and the top of your bag and bring them up until they meet. Clip it all the way down, and this is where it helps just to have the side of the pocket stitched down. You know that everything's going to line up nicely there, and you'll keep on going until you get to that 1/2 inch mark that you made earlier. When you take this to the machine, you'll stitch a 1/2 inch all the way down, and you'll stop and back stitch where you stopped here. You'll just move that corner out of the way, and you'll do it for the other side of the bag as well. When you're stitching the bag closed, where the section is for the pocket, just on the side seam here, I like to just reinforce that section just there, because we've got quite a few layers to go through. You've got a stress point when people are putting things into the pocket, so you just want to make sure you stitch over that a couple of times. When you get to the main fabric, you'll do exactly the same. We're going to take the side gusset and match that up with the long edge here. So bring the corners up together and just match it all the way down to the corner. Continue to line up the side gusset along the edge there, and then on the other side where you've lined this up, bring that all the way down until it forms a little bit of a pleat. We're going to stitch from the top all the way down to the 1/2 inch point there. Repeat that for the other side and also for the opposite side. This section under here where you can see the black here, that's the top of one of the pockets on the side. When we're stitching this closed, I'll actually reinforce over that as well. I've got all 4 sides clipped together. I'm going to stitch from the top to within 1/2 inch from the bottom there. I will stop just right next to that stitch just in there. We'll repeat this for the lining. We'll start with a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top. We'll back stitch at the top here, continue all the way down to the end, and we'll stop at my 1/2 inch mark that I'd made earlier. I'm going over the opening of the pocket, so I'll reinforce this. and just come up to that dot that I made earlier and finish that there. So I've got a nice right angled corner there. Repeat that for your lining. Now if you turn the bag the right way round, this is the side pocket just here, and we've got our 1/2 inch seam just in there. I've got my hand in here, and this is the bottom section across here. So this is the bottom side, and you can see on the corners I've got like a 45-degree mitre in there, and that's because of what we've done on the inside. Now what I want to do is where the seam allowance is, it's actually sitting underneath here. I'm pushing the seam allowance to the underneath of the bag, and I'm going to top stitch all the way across the bottom and along the side. So this seam allowance that's under here, I'm pushing that to the front and back of the bag rather than to the side gusset. And I'm doing that all the way down the side, and on this side I'm pushing it away and heading it toward the main body of the bag. So you can see here, there's your seam. I'm pushing that away from the sides. I'm going to top stitch this down all the way around, all the way down along the bottom and up the side again. And I'm doing that just so that I can have a nice flat seam here, and also stitch down this little mitre that I've got along here. That's the side gusset here, and I'm just pushing my seam to the side. Let's repeat that for the other side. Same for the lining, and then we'll put the two pieces together. With your lining, we'll bring that right way around, and we've got our side pockets. And we're going to line up the side gusset with the side gusset on the main bag. So pop your handles inside, pop your lining inside. So just make sure the right sides are facing each other. So line up the seams here. I haven't got them in opposing directions this time. There's not much thickness to the layers. Normally I like them to go in opposite directions. So line that up. I need an area to turn my lining through and have everything the right way around. So just on the one side, we'll leave an opening here, and that we'll use to turn everything through when we've finished the bag. Line up the other end, and then we can line up the back and front. Make sure the handle is away from your seam. So we've got the bag clipped together all the way around. One side gusset is completely clipped, and the other side gusset we will leave a section open for turning through. We'll start stitching here, back stitch all the way around, come back to this side, back stitch, and then we'll turn it around. I'm doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance along the top as well. Okay, that's the bag finished. We will turn it the right way around, and then we'll just top stitch the edge closed. Okay, there's my opening here. I'm just going to fold the edges under, make sure my lining is on the inside and my main is on the outside, and then we're going to top stitch this down all the way around. Okay, we're completely finished. Let's have a look and see how this has turned out. After I had turned the bag through, remember I left a 2-inch opening at the top here. I've decided that I'm actually going to stitch this all the way to the top because it just gives it a little bit more stability to the bag. So I'm going to just go and stitch this last section down, and all that does is reinforces the handle anyway. So I'm going to do that on all 4 sections of the handle. Okay, the bag's completely finished. You can see the top stitching that I've done on the side here, and really that was because I had made a little bit of an error with the bag in the Y seams, but look, I've made a design feature out of it. You can't tell that it's not supposed to be like that. I can live with it. So you've got the front of your bag here with a big deep pocket in it. The side of your bag has got big deep pockets, as does the other side, and the back. And on the inside of the bag, we have got 2 pockets at the side gusset there. So there's so much room in this bag, you can put all sorts of things on the inside and the outside. Let me just move the camera and I'll show you this in its full glory. So there you go. This is a huge bag, as I thought it was going to be. You're going to get lots and lots of clothes in here. You'll get lots of towels in here. That's the front, the side. It's almost a square. What this bag does need is stabilizer. I thought that using a rubber back curtain fabric, there was going to be enough stability in this fabric to keep it standing up. I was wrong. It needs to have a stabilizer on the inside. So whether you use Palin or Decavoil, it needs something to help the bag sit up a little bit better. But in saying that, I didn't want to have anything that was too heavy. That's why I didn't actually go for my upholstery fabric that I usually use. I wanted something that was lightweight, because having a bag this size, you're going to be putting a lot of things in here, which will make it get really, really heavy. But I like the contrast of the black bias binding on the side of the bag, on the pockets there, and on the inside. I'll just turn that inside out to show you. So the side pockets on the inside have a matching trim, which is from the front of the bag. So that's just a little bit of trim on the inside. So it doesn't matter whether you use bias binding or a strip of fabric that's been folded over twice. One is easier to do than the other though. But it depends on your fabric availability and what it is that you're actually looking for as well. I wanted a black to match the handles that I was going to be using. I would have liked to have done the handles in the same fabric, but I didn't have enough of it. But I actually really like the contrast of the black stripe going down the bag. So it's all the way underneath, completely reinforced. So the bag's not going to fall through anywhere. It's going to be quite strong, even though it's a little bit floppy. So what do you think? It's got lots and lots of pocket space and lots of space for everything else as well. Anyway, I am going to love you and leave you and think about whether or not I like this bag. Mum, do you want it? It's blue. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.